Hello, Gary.
Hi there, Aria Juliet Castillo. How are you this afternoon?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, another policy and politics. Looking forward to tonight's show, as they say.
Yep, this one's going to be pretty interesting. I'm sure that we're going to have lots of tea to be spilt.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I think it's all about having a meaningful conversation. I think that's what people want. They don't want, I'll say it, bullshit. They don't want that, right? They want to know what's really going on. They want to know what they can do to help. And between the three of us, our special guest, Representative Iwamoto, yourself, who've been around the building and working in the environment, and myself, as a former senator and council member, I think we bring a lot to the table. Before we get going, I want to do the disclosure. Can I do that real quick? Uh, so, for the record, no one's paying us to talk. Unfortunately, in some ways, we're all here as volunteers. Mishka's in the back; he's a volunteer. We're not getting paid. Uh, there's nobody motivating us other than our own personal motivation to make the world a better place. That's why we're here. And I'm retired technically, but still involved, of course, with many things. Aria, you work with HAPA still, but HAPA's not endorsing this or sponsoring this tonight. And we're just here to have a good conversation.
So, who do we have joining us today?
We have, of course. Well, before I do that, I want to invite people that are watching as they sign in to know that you can put questions in the chat, and we may not get to all of them, but we'll do our best as we go through. So we have Representative Kim Coco Iwamoto, who is I'll just for the record, full disclosure, a dear friend. I think she rocks. And I've helped her in the past, and she's there when we need her in terms of representing the people, and she's willing to raise her hand, and ask the tough questions. And so she's going to be here answering hopefully some tough questions and just speaking truth to power and letting us know about her first uh, legislative session, brand new state house representative. She I'm sure had expectations going in, and now that she's been through a session, we'll see how those expectations played out.
Well, full disclosure to the audience, I know Representative Kim Coco Iwamoto very well, as I served as her campaign manager for her past two campaigns in 2022 and 2024. So I have worked behind the scenes with her. I got to know her very well during this time. I couldn't be more proud of who we've elected. She's exactly who she is, living and breathing, walking, talking exactly her truth, and we love her for it.
Yes, absolutely. And before I forget, too, if you're watching this on Facebook and it's streaming, I shared it, Aria shared it, other people have shared it. Please share it because we want to spread the message and get people tuning in. Last 2 weeks ago, we had Congresswoman Jill Tokuda and Salma from the ACLU. And we want to make this a regular thing and build a community around it.
All right, shall we bring Representative Iwamoto to the stage?
Let's do it. Drum roll, please.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your new podcast. I actually watched the first two episodes and I was so impressed and so grateful that you're offering this platform to gain more knowledge and insights into what's happening locally, nationally. I really appreciate as a consumer of news and information. I really appreciate the quality of conversations that you're having.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's jump right into it. You just completed your first session as a state representative. How did it go?
It went in some ways as expected. In other ways, I was kind of surprised. I tend to enter spaces with optimism and with hope that people are going selves and reaching their highest potentials to reach their highest potentials as well. So It started off kind of rocky. Obviously I met with, it was really important, and I said this before I started my first session. I in some of the media interviews I did, that I was hoping to serve committee. As you know, I've written op-eds around estate tax, around different issues affecting states' finances, about raising revenue. That's always been one of the key platforms for myself. So being on finance is really important. So I met with the finance chair to make sure that he knew that I was very interested, and we spoke for an hour. And the message I received was that he only wanted yes people on the committee, and it wasn't going to be a right fit for him to have me on that committee. And I relayed that to the speaker, because ultimately the House rules indicate that the Speaker of the House is the one to make the determination in terms of who serves on which committee. And so I strongly encouraged her to make sure that I'm appointed to finance. And after back and forth, even though she's the ultimate decider, clearly she consulted with somebody else or other people, and I was not put on finance committee. And I made it clear, I said, I have so many ideas, and if I don't feel like I could be part of the conversation within the committee, then I'll have to bring my thoughts and perspectives both to the floor as well as to the media. And I feel that's what I've been doing. And now we have a new chair of finance.
I have to say, karma. Karma is
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, we have a new finance chair. And,
so does this shake up in the House? Do you think that this is a message of true reform? Is it just a new name in same old, same old? What's the deal?
Well, first, let me just clarify. When the former chair, finance chair, indicated to me that people who would agree, people who would not challenge his leadership and how he was leading the committee. Of course, I always have questions, and I actually think that a collaborative process will result in a better product. And so that's always been my experience. And so I think Marcia was asking to clarify what kind of people did he want. Yeah, again, he wanted people who would basically go along and get along. But back to your question about, so there was an interesting vote on the second to the last day of session, where the finance chair, Yamashita, was forced to rise up and defend one of his bills. And it was a bill that would have sunset a lot of tax credits, both for businesses the sunset, the more of the social safety net tax credits that affect low income people. When this specific bill came up for third reading, I didn't see. I think what happens is, whenever they see that it's Yamashita, whenever they see that it's a finance chair's bill, a lot of my colleagues don't even look at the bill, because they think, oh, we just have to go along and support it no matter what. But of course, because I read every bill that I'm going to be voting on, I actually rose up and said, wait a minute, you want to sunset all of the tax credits? That includes a lot of tax credits that help our most vulnerable families, so that they can, so that they can pay the rent and put food on the table, and they're living paycheck to paycheck. I said, I'm not comfortable with that. So I voted no on third reading. I'm not sure if anybody who else voted no on it, but by the time it came around, so that kind of alerted people, I think. And by the time it came around for there was 22 people who voted no, and I think 3 people who voted with reservations. And some of those people were part of his own faction. And One actually retrieved his no vote. One of the people who was going to vote no. It was very interesting. And to me, that was very surprising, right? That there was this whole wave of people who felt now they had the courage to vote against this potentially damaging bill. He did so even though even though the finance chair basically asked the House members to support this bill. The fact that 22 people went on a record voting no, that's a sign of what may come. Now, what we've read in the media and what I've been reading in the media is that that basically he was kind of closed off, and I think for the most part, a lot of people didn't feel that maybe he was as accessible, that he held back information, that we were given information at the last minute. And that is a tactic, actually, withholding and then releasing information and when there's no time to do anything. That's a tactic that I've observed being used during the whole session by many people in power, keeping us uninformed so we can't actually rise up and challenge it or make it better. And so that's actually a problem. But anyway, so he's being critiqued for that.
If I could jump in, I want to just recognize you. This is not just a love fest for Representative Iwamoto, but I have to say that your willingness to raise your hand, and I've been there. I served 8 years in the Senate, and I know this. You got a room full of people, your colleagues. They don't know what to do, and they don't want to offend the chair, and this and that. But when one person raises their hand and says, "Wait a second, what about this or what about that?" That pulls back the curtain and empowers other people to then jump in and do the same thing. So it's important for you, for the people, to have people like yourself in there playing that role. Someone who's willing to raise their hand, willing to challenge, willing to not just to say yes. And it absolutely happens in both the House and the Senate. And it just takes a few people to raise their hand and ask the questions that the public should be asking. So thank you for that. Do you think with Representative Todd, I don't know him well. I don't have anything bad to say about him. I've had some conversations in the past. He seems like a pleasant fellow. Do you think Representative Todd, he has said publicly that he intends to move in a different direction, as has the speaker. Do you have some optimism, or is it a wait and see thing?
Yes, no, I definitely do. So from the moment I met Representative Todd, now Finance Chair Todd, he did identify himself to me as a Bernie Sanders supporter. Like that's the kind of Democrat he identifies as. And to me, that represents, power to the corporate corruption out of making. And it also means that somebody who's more open to a democratic process. And so him has been that he's easy to have a discussion with. He comes across to me as somebody who's, on the more maybe humble side. Like he's kind of everyman in terms of like, hey, I'm just a representative. I don't know everything. And I'm here to, like it feels like he truly would welcome more input so that we have a better outcome, right? Like he really is what I'm gathering, and I think that's how people feel about him. So I'm very optimistic about that. I have reached out to him and let him know that I am interested in serving on finance committee. So we'll see if actually, he puts me on finance, or if I get on finance. And ultimately, again, it's the will of the speaker. But if the speaker consults with the finance chair, maybe we'll get a different result.
And also, they've both indicated, or at least the chair, Todd, has indicated that he intends to only hear bills that have actually budget impacts. And I don't know if
okay,
that
and
will
that's
happen.
something I wanted. Yeah, and just to clarify, it was leadership. Leadership and speaker is ultimately responsible for referring
No,
those non-fiscal bills to finance. So it wasn't all on the former finance chair.
no,
I mean, and so my understanding was that it was Chris Todd and Sean Quinlan, maybe others, who were involved in referring all of these bills to finance or to whatever committee, right? So they can't lay it all. It's not, the finance chair isn't the one pulling things, according to the rules, isn't the one pulling things into that committee, right? It's leadership, specifically speaker, who's allocating. Whereas in the Senate, I think, as you know, Senator Hooser, in the Senate, the actual staff of the Senate just makes that determination of which bills go to which
right.
committee. Is that correct?
Right now in the
Right? So there,
Senate they have staff recommends referrals to a
correct.
committee, and then the committee does it,
Right.
and they can be overrode by. I'm not sure. I'm checking with someone to see what about our feed. What about it?
It's unclear. You are, but no.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So
We
earlier,
have a little bit of a still of a lag, but we'll
it's fine.
go ahead.
Earlier in the session, the House recommitted the marijuana bill in kind of an unusual procedural move. I think that Representative Chris Todd was actually a part of. Can you let us know what actually happened there, and why did we get close to legalizing gambling before we legalized marijuana?
And this, okay, and I just want to make sure everyone knows that when I talk about things in this platform, these are all issues I've raised directly with leadership. And I did point it out to them. I said, wait a minute, you guys send legalizing responsible adult use of cannabis, CPC, or Consumer Protection and Commerce, but you wouldn't send the gambling bill, the online sports gambling, to CPC as well. You know, I mean, to me, you were definitely somebody setting up the cannabis bill to get stuck, which is what happened. And they claim they didn't have the votes to vote on it for second reading. And just to clarify, normally it's very rare that bills get killed on second reading because everyone's like, okay, it's another part of the process. Most people speak out against bills on the third reading or final reading, right? So why would you try to kill it so early? And there were a lot of people who wanted to vote on second reading, and there was a whole debate about that against recommit back to the previous committee, which I think might have been Judiciary. I'm not sure which committee it was, but it was sending it back, which effectively stalled or killed the bill. So I did raise that. I'm like, don't that we didn't notice what just happened there. Like, that the kind of manipulation of the referral process helps usher some bills through, right? And then it actually is designed to kill other bills. The other issue is that leadership uses their vote counting to keep information from the whole body, right? So there's a couple ways they do this. One is by having one-on-one. They send out whips or somebody to go find out what people's inclinations are about the bill, and then from there or they use green slips. So on third reading, I think in the final reading, if you're going to vote no on a bill, the custom and practice is that you turn in this green slip which says, I am not going to. For the Democrats it's green, and I think for the Republican caucus it's like red or something. But either way, there's these slips that you fill out, and to me, and then it gets sent into another member of leadership. Oh, how many no votes they have. Oh, it might be because people can switch their votes and you can have more no votes than you imagined, or people can switch things around. But it's an inclination. And to me, it's something that only leadership holds on to, that information. And then they could kind of say, oh, we're going to make a motion to recommit because we don't have the votes. So either it's through kind of whipping or polling informally, or through green slips that only they have the information. So I don't really know, right? Because there were a lot of people who said, I want to, who with the with the recommit, because the fact of the matter is there's just the majority of people just go along. It's, which is a whole another bigger problem that I find observing as a first time observer from the inside. There's this, I consider it kind of an infantilizing of us as representatives. We're all elected, we all come in as full-grown adults. Many of us have worked in other, jobs, and when you're working among co-workers who are all equally elected by the same numbers of people, like why aren't we all equals? Why aren't we speaking to each other like adults? Why is there this kind of weird it's this weird kind of like deference to leadership that is so, I find to be so artificial and bizarre and quite detrimental to democracy. But it happens. So in many of these cases, people go along with what leadership recommends. And so leadership made it clear that they're recommending to recommit. And even, I think we heard one of the Republican representatives say, excuse me, Speaker, why is there this motion to recommit? And leadership just decided to say no response, which I found like shocking, that you can just, like, that's how closed everything is in terms of transparency. What is the harm of explaining why? And also, when you're recommitting so that there's no vote on second reading, who are you protecting? Are you protecting representatives from being held accountable by their constituents? Because people should not know how their representative is going to vote on a particular issue. Like, that's very strange to me, if that's the whole principle behind doing a recommittal instead of just letting people vote on the substance of the bill on second reading. And so,
Yeah, if I could jump in, the where do we go from here? I mean, how do we fix it? Is my ultimate question. And because I agree with you, leadership is the one calling the shots. We can't just blame the finance chair. Leadership is there and has to be responsibility. But ultimately, it's a majority allowing leadership, right? Because you can't be speaker without 26 votes. And so how do we as a community, how do we in the public get the majority, or at least get the representatives who represent us in our district to raise their hand like you are and say, no, I want to vote on this. We shouldn't do this in secret. We shouldn't do it with red slips or green slips. We should put the motion on the floor. Who supports this bill to legalize cannabis and who's opposed to this bill? And so how do we get more representatives owning their democracy, owning their responsibility? I know we always try to elect them, and it seems like too many pull into their shell once they get there. Thankfully, you did not do that. But oftentimes, when I was in the Senate, it was a fear-based environment. Senators were afraid they're going to lose their next election. They're afraid they're not going to be on a certain committee. They're afraid they're not going to get something funded or a bill passed. And so a lot of the decision making was based on fear, and I can understand that. But do you have any suggestions on how we motivate other people to raise their hand?
Yeah, well, so I don't understand. Maybe it's because that I've lived. I can't go around fearful of not being included. I'm so fearful I'm going to be discriminated against. I'm so fearful. No, you can't live like that. No, I'm serious. Like, some of us, actually, that kind of fear, in some ways, it's a luxury that many people cannot afford, right? You got to keep moving forward and do things and have the integrity to do things in an open way. That, but why would you be afraid to be held accountable by your constituents, right? So one of the ways you can get over that is by polling or surveying your district, which I've done. So I can say, hey, look how many of you, like in my last survey, I had around 600 responses, which is a sizable for any formal polling company. That is a sizable data set. And so when they overwhelmingly tell me they support adult use, responsible use cannabis, then I believe them and I will vote accordingly. So when people say they're afraid, it's because are they lazy? Did they not survey their constituents? Did they not bother to have these difficult conversations? For some people, it's difficult, for not. So, if it's about fear, there are many legislators that all these good government reforms about transparency and accountability and addressing pay to play corruption in the legislature, they truly believe that their constituents don't care about these issues. That at the end of the day, they just care whether or not they passed laws that were the substance, of the laws that they passed, stuff like that, that they don't identify the process of lawmaking. And I just want to, and to them, I want to remind them that there are going to be 29 representatives returning to the legislature in January, or possibly the special session, who got into office after the corruption scandal, right? Who've been there for, and they all came in after two were sent to prison for corruption. I think it's very, very clear wanted new blood, partly because they don't trust, right? And I think many of the legislators who kind of are touting this, like, oh, they don't care, they come from this old guard, the pre-corruption scandal, and they may have a rude awakening. I mean, I think hopefully there'll be a lot more candidates running things. There are programs out there who are trying to, make sure that there are more people capable of running for office. And I think, we can only, I think this point was made last time, you can only, on one of your earlier podcasts, was that you could only vote somebody out if there's somebody willing to challenge. If there's no one challenging, then you're stuck with that person, no matter how corrupt they are.
Exactly.
I think.
Are you having difficulties working with your colleagues in the legislature when you're also calling them out that they're not stepping up, that they're not, they're supporting this good old boy network process?
I just speak to them quite frankly. I mean, for instance, I just had a conversation with somebody who's been there for more than 10 years. And he was like, oh, yeah, he and his people in his faction. And by the way, faction, I actually think they're more like prison gangs. They're just like, in the sense that they're kind of formed out of fear. Like you think about somebody going into prison for the first time and you're like, oh my God, I'm so vulnerable. I don't want to be shanked in the, in the yard. So they kind of seek cover by a faction. They're going to protect me. They're going to make sure my bills, at least one gets passed, or they're going to do this for me, and we're going to have this weird loyalty pact. And then that's all, to me, it's just a demonstration of that fear kind of embodied, and it's so weird and dysfunctional, and it doesn't serve the people of Hawaii. Ultimately, it doesn't serve the people to go into these weird dysfunctional bargaining units where they horse trade self-servingly for committee chairs, or who's going to be this, when they might not be qualified, when they might not be the best person to chair a certain committee, but because they've aligned themselves with a certain prison gang, they are now finding themselves in a certain situation. So how do I get along with them? I don't know. I mean, I just make sure that it's not personal. And even if I call somebody out and there's some kind of tension, to cut through that and just find other ways of connecting with them. And I have this kind of rapport with Democrats and Republicans in terms of, like there are Republicans who drafted bills that I find very offensive as a trans person. And then, but I look forward to working with them and collaborating with them on other bills that we do agree on, right? So I remove this kind of pettiness and I try to not acknowledge it. People are going to feel the way they're going to feel about me, and I've just learned that I can't control that, but I can control my own behavior. I can control the way I engage and invite conversation with other people, and just there's other ways I can show them that I respect them or that they are valued, that I see them as an equal representative. And I try to affirm that as much as I know that there are people who are very suspicious of me, and that I'm a known entity to a degree, right? So it's not like they don't know me at all. And for me is to be consistent, to be kind of, in terms of, I'm not attacking or going after any person. It's the ideas, or it's the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability. It's the centering of power on a few people. It's not personal. I'm not against that because I'm against the person centered on. I'm against the corruption that leads to. I'm against the removal or detraction away from representational democracy. And I keep saying that, and I keep demonstrating that. And over time, hopefully people will be like, yeah, it's not personal. It's just, this looks suspicious, what I'm doing. And she's calling me out. Like, okay.
I said, thank you. Thank you for being willing to speak out. I've learned that that's where a lot of the power lies, is being willing to, again, I say, raise your hand. You don't even have to raise your hand, but just to speak out, ask questions, and people get used to, oh, okay, well, that's Kim Coco, that's Gary Hooser. They're going to do that. So they better think a little bit more before they do what they do. And if more people would do that, I've got a suggestion for the audience as we move, that we need to take people like Representative Iwamoto when we find them and wrap them in love and aloha and tell them thank you. So they realize that people appreciate the work that they're doing. So when they're bummed, when they feel like they're not getting anywhere, or it's stressful, that a little nudge, a little email, a phone call, to say thank you for the work you're doing means a lot. So not just for you, there's others out there that are also trying. I wish they would try more and try harder sometimes, but we need to give them nudges and mahalos as well. And we talked about the election.
And also
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, Gary. So, I came in with like a whole bunch of other freshman representatives, and some of them are more progressive, some of them are more centrist, some of them are maybe more conservative. But we were all dealt different cards from the beginning. So we're not all coming in as equals, right? Some of us, like it was made clear to me because of that I was coming in with cards that disadvantaged maybe me, and others came in with cards that maybe were giving them the notice that, hey, you have more access to power here. And so to me, they may be having a different tactic in terms of the ways that they want to serve their community and Hawaii at large. I try to give them space to do that. I don't, ultimate end of the day, they have to look at themselves in the mirror, and they have to figure out a way to, right? And so what works for me may not work for them. So I don't expect my colleagues to do what I'm doing. They might not have the skill sets. I've lived a different life, and I can afford to do certain things that maybe other people can't. And so, I just bring it because I can. And also back to what you're saying about my community, the community reaching out to me today. I have to share with you that the reason why I feel so like I have the responsibility to be so confrontational around issues of accountability and public transparency and all that, it's because the people have already lifted me up, right? So many hundreds of volunteers and so many thousands of volunteer hours and all of the donations. People have brought me to this space already. So for me, it's about kind of living up to the expectation that they invested in me doing what I'm doing today. So it comes from a place of gratitude, that sense of responsibility. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would be remiss if I didn't say happy birthday. And I believe you have a birthday party or fundraiser or celebration. This is not a paid
Yeah,
campaign announcement. This is just
yeah,
tell us when that is.
no, it actually might be inappropriate. So
Okay.
if people want to know, they can search for me on social media if they want to know. But I'm not gonna do a plug for my
Okay.
fundraiser.
Well,
Thank you
happy
though.
birthday anyway. And thank
Thank
you.
you.
I know it's Saturday, but people could do a little Googling and find out. But thank you. That shows you the kind of person you are. You're not going to be campaigning here on the podcast. So,
Speaking of your reelection campaign and fundraising, you don't take corporate or PAC money. Why is that so important to you?
Well, especially because the person I ran against for the last 3 elections took a lot of corporate impact money, and so for me, it was a way to distinguish myself from the way he fundraised and the way he was influenced ultimately. So, and truthfully, I am lucky enough to have access to resources. I did as much fundraising as I did. I also, and as much small dollar donations and as many donations I received from people who work to support themselves. I am able to donate and finance a certain part of my campaign, and I'm grateful that that I'm in that position. So maybe that's part of it, but it's also because I don't know if I could have done it. Could I have won? Tell me, Aria, could I have won if I didn't put any of my own money in? If I just relied on, the community? I mean, given the numbers, if you look at my numbers and my opponent's numbers, could I have won?
It's tough to say. You were outspent 3-1. So it's hard to imagine that if we spent less money that we still could have done it. But it's pretty incredible the amount of mail that has to go through. Since your district is not all walkable, you have to reach voters in different ways. And most of the funding goes to mailers so you can communicate with your constituents. You did surveys, you did voter get out the vote postcards, you did sidewalk talks to everyone, all of that. The postage is what eats up the money. But you were able to have so many meaningful conversations and ID so many supporters that you developed relationships with them, and then they got you elected.
I would say
Right.
let's put this into context. You beat the Speaker of the House. Okay, I don't know when that's ever been done. I don't remember any Speaker of the House in my memory losing an election. You ran twice or 3 times before you won.
Third time's the charm. 3 times.
And a lot of people will give up after the first time. I've been there. I've lost races. It hurts, but you stuck it out. You ran 3 times against the Speaker of the House. You did it the hard way. You worked on the ground. You talked to people face to face. He outspent you 3-1. Okay. So that is an
Yeah.
awesome achievement. And that's recognized by your colleagues, I'm sure. So in terms of them thinking, well, you're not going to be here next year, well, that's not the case because you're here for the long run. You've proven that. And that,
Yes,
yeah,
and also I think I've demonstrated that I'm here for the long game, not the quick wins, not the wins that are self-serving, right? Not the wins that give me a tiara. They're the wins that actually uplift and support our democracy, right? I want to make sure that the democratic process, and that could mean that issues don't pan out, but democracy is elevated, and that is more, I think, more important than a personal pet project I'm working on getting funded, or a personal, issue that I care about personally is addressed. For me, the focus has always been about elevating representational democracy, even at my own, even though it might cost me personally, right? Yeah, and so yeah, and I think my colleagues appreciate that, and I'm pretty sure it has earned some credibility. And there are so many, like almost every day there's a new example where somebody at the legislature shares with me some difference that's happening, that where everyone's so happy with the changes that have occurred because I unseated the previous Speaker of the House. And to them, I say, "You're welcome. You're welcome." So yeah, it's kind of funny.
About a year ago, actually, all of the Democratic establishment, including Governor Green, Senator Schatz, Mayor
Mhm.
Blangiardi, they came out and endorsed your opponent. Now that you've served your first
Right.
term, what is your working relationship with them? Do you think, can you imagine a universe where they endorse your reelection?
Um, I don't know, but apparently their endorsement's not that influential. Maybe I don't want their endorsement after all, I mean, that's really what it's shown me is I think it's important is that maybe the endorsement, I think maybe at the end of the day, the fact that he was so endorsed made him actually look weak and made him look, that why does he need all that, and are these people perfect? I mean, they all have their own baggage. They've all offended somebody. You know what I mean? And so when you stand next to people like that, then maybe it worked against his favor. And so yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'll need the endorsements in the future. And then also, then they might expect me to endorse them, and maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe they're not worthy of my endorsement. So,
One of your most talked about campaign ads was focusing on the dangerous conditions of Queen Street. And after you came out and
mm,
published that ad, your opponent and his friends made a big proclamation to fix it. I'm just wondering, how is Queen Street doing today?
it did get repaved. Unfortunately, there's still flooding, but the street that my campaign focused on did get repaved, and what they found miraculously found $5 million to do something they said couldn't be done, and so they did it. They found a way, and so again, it really, I'm grateful to do that. And also, I just want to share. So it is paved, but it still floods. There's a lot more work, and that's going to continue happening until we address the needs of all of the industrial businesses along that Queen Street corridor, who actually need parking. If they're a fender repair shop, they need parking for their vehicles. So it's going to be hard to kind of trench and create a way to stop the flooding. And we're so close to the ocean and ocean level and all coastal coastal waters raising up, etc. But I do want to share with you, so our district, I think, got around $3.4 million through the legislative process through grant and aid, which is taxpayer-funded grant and aid for nonprofits who are serving within District 25. And so, and I'm really happy, despite what's kind of gone on or the way I hold people accountable, my colleagues still were able to make sure. I mean, granted, my district it's the urban core, and so there's a lot of organizations in my district that are based in my district or serve the people in my district and people around the island of Oahu. So, but nevertheless, we still got funding for operations as well as CIP allocated to us. And of course, the governor will have to sign off on this. But the money is still flowing into the district. So that's good news.
Great news. Another thing that's going on in your district is Kaka'ako Makai, and OHA's push, to be able to develop that area. What is your position on that?
So my position has always been that OHA should receive the full amount that the settlement was for, which I think was 200 million. And so because of the debt the state owed to OHA, they settled on this land in exchange for the cash. And what I've advocated for to help and serve the beneficiaries of OHA, that OHA received the original 200 million plus interest since that time, which maybe was around 2011, and that they get all of that cash, and then they can invest it or direct infusion into beneficiaries to serve the beneficiaries. So that's been my goal. And then the surveys show that a majority of the people in my district do support keeping development, or at least not building high along the Iwamoto on the Kaka'ako Makai side. So that's what their position is, that they don't support OHA building there, or maybe anybody building there, but it is OHA's plan. It is their land currently. I would like to, and even if OHA moved forward with that development, they wouldn't make money for like decades. Like, they were wanting to be developers and then sell off units. And by the time you made a profit, the profit to then help benefit wouldn't have been. I'm like, there's no money making scheme here that would leave you with the funds needed today. There are many philanthropists who invest in the community today because the people are the investment, right? It's their leadership skills, their education, they're getting them assets to purchase a first home. All of these things are the investment, and housing security, education, all of these things become the return on investment. So if the community of philanthropists are investing into the OHA beneficiaries, then why shouldn't OHA seek to do direct investments also in their beneficiaries? And I think having $400 million today could do a lot of impact and a lot of good for the OHA beneficiaries.
I want to jump in and thank you also for showing up at the Trump protest rallies that have been held at the Capitol and around the state, actually. And there's a handful of legislators that have showed up and spoken out and carried signs and done that. And I for one would encourage more of our state and county leadership to get out there on the street and speak out like you have. So I don't know if you want to speak to that issue.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting when I walk through a crowd, and I thank people for being there, for everyone coming together to raise our voice against fascism, against the cruelty and meanness of the current federal administration. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm so happy more legislators here. And I actually do point out, I'm like, oh, what district do you live in? Oh, your representative is here. Like, I think you mentioned Amy Peruso's at these events. I've seen, Tina Grandinetti, Adela Bellotti. There's a few, so people are appearing, but I think not, again, it's just I maybe have a distinct look that makes it easier to identify me. But a lot of times they're just in regular, like a lot of legislators show up in their regular, political rally clothing, which is comfort, and they look like regular normal people. So they're kind of hard to pick out in a crowd. But they're there, but there are many there. And also some people don't, some legislators, and I don't always speak at these events because I want to hear from the people. You know what I mean? So because I'm stepping aside to make room and time and opportunities to hear from the people who are being impacted, then people don't see that I'm there. And the same goes for other legislators, right? They don't take the spotlight because they want to raise up the people's voices. And then people think that we're not there. So, I mean, but we know we're there, and that's important too.
Anything specific we can look forward to in the special sessions that are upcoming?
Yes, well, I think everyone's been pounding the same drum, which is we need to raise revenues. And that's another issue that I think people were very disappointed about, because we've been talking about raising revenues to deal with the federal administration's budget cuts from day one. And also, even the former finance chair did point out, he did do a presentation for our caucus that identified all of these funding sources, like increased capital gains tax. He did identify early on the TAT increase, but also the EITC non-resident apportioning, the conveyance tax increase. So really taxing the transactions when, billionaires or millionaires sell, luxury properties to capture some of that gains. And he even actually did acknowledge that we had almost $300 million in surplus this year because the estate tax taxes that he wanted to diminish, they actually, because his bill last session didn't pan out, we were able to capture some of those estate tax gains. So yeah, so a lot of the bills that would have identified revenue sources for one, really, which was the green tax or the TAT, that tax tourists and dedicated funding to take care of the environment, which is also going to be impacted, funding cuts. But going back to what so many bills came forward to raise tax revenue, and they all died under his watch, right? And I think people are really upset about that. And again, I don't know if that was one of the straws that broke that back, but I do know a lot of people were upset because there's a lot of projects that people drafted bills, and the projects needed funding, right? So if you're constantly trying to manage the state's finances through budget cuts, when he gave these income tax cuts to the wealthiest families, like, I think it's great. I think it's great that lower income families, the bottom 4/5 of our states, the bottom 4/5 of those who are, but the top 1/5 of Hawaii households, the top 1/5 wealthiest households, they didn't need those tax cuts, and yet those tax cuts for them represented a huge part of our budget. And they didn't need those tax cuts. And in fact, during a recession, what we know is the wealthy go shopping for third and fourth homes. They go shopping for luxury goods. It's ridiculous. The wealthiest among us do not need the tax cuts. So when he kept giving tax cuts and not creating a replacement, you know, bills that would actually generate taxes. And I had a bill that would have raised taxes by collecting GET. On the GET, we would have collected had those empty homes been rented, and that the family that lived in the empty homes, had they been in the community spending money, buying coffee, grocery shopping, there would have been GET attached to all of that spending. So calculating and capturing all of that GET from the very wealthy land investors would have made a difference, and none of that happened. Right. And so that, I think, might have contributed to this kind of this turnover in finance chair leadership. So Huna, I'm hoping that Chris Todd, as the new finance chair, will be more alert to this, and you know, and take this task seriously. Raising revenue is like the prime directive of the legislature. Among the three branches of government, you know, the executive, judicial, and the legislative branch, it's the legislature that must raise revenue. It starts with us. Yes, the executive branch, you know, can veto whatever, but we can override. And we need to be responsible for all of the shortcomings that we are facing because of the federal administration, who actually gave huge tax cuts to the wealthiest families. And it's been like that for 9 years. The very least, we should be saying, hey, the wealthiest families who benefited from these Trump tax cuts for the last 9 years, we're going to capture and redirect directly to Hawaii all of those tax gains you benefited from. And we're going to make sure that they can keep people housed and feed our hungriest families and kapuna. And now we're going to need to address Medicaid and education. All of these cuts we're going to face, we need to find a way to say, no, enough is enough. We need to make sure we're taking care of the people of Hawaii. And I can tell you, and one of the things the former chair kept saying is, oh, if we raise the income tax on these families, on the wealthiest families, they're going to run away to another state. I'm like, well, good riddance. And secondly, they all come back, right? They all come back. They all, no matter, they all want to be here. When you make as much money as you can, you're okay paying. And you're at the end of your life, you're okay paying taxes as long as you get to be where you want to be, around the people that you love. And, you know, so they come back. And so yeah, so we gotta do more of that. We gotta do more of that and stand up to stuff like that. Also, I have one more thing, and I know this money talk is really boring for a lot of people, but I also want to talk. One of the things I spoke out against on the floor of the House was that under the former chair's, finance chair's leadership, we have become over dependent on this thing called general obligation bonds, which is basically debt. So he, instead of paying things, collecting tax revenue and paying things with cash, he has increased our dependence on these general obligation bonds, which is really a line of credit. And when you spend, let's say, 100 general obligation bond building somewhere, or a facility or something, it actually costs taxpayers $200 million because of all the interest over 20 years. So it doesn't make sense to give wealthy people tax cuts so we have less cash, so we then burden the future taxpayers with more debt. It just doesn't make sense. And maybe people heard that. I don't know.
And who collects the
you know, but somebody's got to stand up. It's investors. They collect the interest. So it's money that, you know, oftentimes leaves the state.
I had a question. If it's it may not be an easy one, but I'll ask it anyway. I noticed in the chat somebody had said earlier a comment about the Democratic Party calling the shots and the Democratic Party somehow being the power broker. And in my experience, yeah, I never heard from the party, but it begs the question. It
Yeah.
begs the question: Who is there some uh, single powerful force out there? Who is it? Is it the it's not the party? Yeah, talk about who's calling the shots. Is it organic? Is it
It's always follow the money, follow the money. I mean, it's really the people, Civil Beat and the New York Times, I think, did a whole, reporting on this about follow the money. It's pay to play. There's a lot of people donating. And then what we saw was that, corporations would donate, or, wealthy donors would donate to campaigns of one legislative leader, and then that person, because he doesn't have a race, would give to all these other you know candidate campaigns, and then these people would get elected or reelected, and then they'd vote for this person to be part of leadership. And so there's this weird kind of there's a pay to play within a pay to play. It's like multi layers of pay to play, and it's very frustrating, but it's there's a lot of transparency. Just follow the money. It's been reported. I think, Gary, you've discussed
right?
this
Right.
and you've shown it through graphs. Like how many legislators did let how much money did let's say a finance chair give to all the other candidates to get elected to be finance chair, so and the federal parties do this too, the Democratic National Committee and also the Republicans. When you want a certain seat on a federal committee, and if you want a certain position on that committee or whatever it is, you are given an invoice from the national committee, both Democrat and Republican, of how much money you need to raise and donate to the national committee of both parties in order to get that seat assignment, committee assignment, or committee position. So it's very transactional. It happens on the federal level and it happens here. So, I mean,
Right.
yeah,
I
it's
think I
gross.
think
And
locally, I haven't experienced it on the party level. I certainly big developers, big banks, big people who benefit from the money the government generates. They're lobbyists are in your room, and they're workers and their trade unions and whatnot. But I've never had the party itself, the local party, call
and
me and
in
say, Gary, we need your vote, or we need you to do this or that.
Yeah, and in fact, wouldn't we? I actually just spoke out at the Oahu County Convention the other weekend, and I said, "Listen," and I wasn't invited to speak. I just grabbed the microphone during lunch. I said, "Hey, listen up, everyone." I said, "I've been on a resolution committee. I've gone to the county conventions, the state conventions. I've been part of the debate and discussion on all of the resolutions and the platform." I'm like, oh my God, we invest so much time into that process. And I can tell you, as an elected, now a newly elected member, no one's holding me accountable. Like, I got elected as a Democrat, and no one's holding me or my colleagues accountable for all the work that you're doing, on these committees, on the resolution committee or the platform committee. You guys debate, be supported, and what is the clear message of the party. But you guys don't do anything when we vote against the party's interests. So I actually wish the Democrats would actually try to hold us accountable to the party platform, to the party resolutions. And I asked them to do that. Um, I know I'm going to actually ask my campaign manager to help me put together a little score sheet, so that I can share with Democrats in my district, to show them, to put a side by side among the party platform, both the national as well as the state and county platforms and resolutions, along with how I voted on bills, and see if there's an alignment that I can demonstrate that I deserve to be endorsed by the Democratic Party. And then maybe as a template that other Democrats who serve in elected office can also use that kind of template. Maybe make it more proactive instead of telling the party to hold me accountable. Maybe I can demonstrate that, hey, I'm thinking about this. We'll see. It's a different dynamic.
That would be awesome. I think that that's a great idea. I wanted to first invite the people watching to send some questions into the chat. We're almost at the end of our time with Representative Kim Coco, but I also wanted to bring up Mishka if he's available, because he had a great question to ask about your raises that you just recently received.
Hey, Kim Coco, long time no see.
Hey.
Full disclosure, I volunteered with Kim Coco's campaign, so very familiar with you, what you stand for. I'm a state worker, so you guys get to make some decisions sometimes related to how much we get, paid and those kinds of things. Not all of it, but there's negotiations that happen with the union and whatnot. But there's in HGA at least, we've got a big vacancy rate. Some offices around 30%. And I know this past session, there's been talk about the budget, and they're thinking, let's cut those positions, let's defund those positions. They're vacant, they're not being used. Meanwhile, if you work in those offices, you're doing more work than usual because those positions are vacant. We saw legislators give themselves a raise, and I know the judges were a big part of that reason, but it didn't come across that great to the rest of us, seeing a 30% raise or 40% raise in some cases over the next 4 years, and not much being done about our public services. Like, how are we going to increase the the appeal to be a public service worker, right? And make sure that the services that we're providing people are good, so they're not waiting long times for permits, or their driver's license office, and all those different things that the local government does, and we need them to do. But it seems more and more that Democrats are kind of taking a wait and see approach, or even sometimes a doggy or doge approach, by saying, let's cut, right? Let's cut those positions. Let's get them off the payroll, off the budget. What is your answer, and what can be done about that?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I've spoken out a lot. There are so many bills that actually wanted to give a department the permission to redesignate a position as exempt from collective bargaining so that they could pay them more instead. And I would be like, wait a minute. So you're underfunding a position. So no one wants to even take the position or get hired with all the benefits that a union member gets, right? And all the job security and all the pension, all of the benefits. And I said, and so you're going to basically exempt, no one's taking that low pay, and now you're going to give the department more money to offer more pay to an exempt worker. And I called it out every single time it came to a committee and on the floor. It was so gross. I'm like, why are we perpetuating this dysfunction? Why aren't we just paying workers like a living wage or competitive wage so that we fill the positions and get the work done and get those services delivered? I mean, and again, once leadership, it's so hard. I mean, it's not hard. It's not hard for me to say that and to keep repeating it, but it's, to look at my colleagues and all of them just be like, okay, well, leadership wants to pretend we're not doing that. So we're just gonna, enable their pretending. It's bizarre. And but somebody is putting it into the record. Somebody ensure that we keep calling that out. It's shenanigans. And in terms of the raises, that was discussed among members, and and as somebody who I don't support my family on my legislative salary. So it's really hard for me to say, no, you guys who do don't deserve a raise. But what I did also do is say, wait a minute, why don't we attach teacher salaries to legislative salaries? Because quite frankly, teachers work twice as many months of the year as we do currently. Teachers are have to actually be qualified in ways that we are not qualified before we start our jobs. Like teachers need to get, have their practice done. They have to test to show competency in both pedagogy and subject matter. We don't. So I did try to align it and say, and really kind of throw down the gauntlet and I even actually put it in the form of a resolution that we should tie, that the House should tie salaries of our members to teachers. So as if our salaries rise, so should teachers' median salaries. I addressed it. And then I've been looking more closely at this whole salary commission. We could change the statute to separate out the judiciary from the legislature so that we couldn't use that because for those of us who do care about, making sure we have enough judges to make sure that justice isn't delayed or denied, and we have like less people sitting in prison waiting for their hearing, all of that's happening. The judiciary needed its raise. Not that I support. And then here's the other part. Maybe we're going to get, maybe the people will rise up and hold now that they know how much their legislators making, maybe people are going to be more demanding on that legislator, and maybe they hold them to great. I'm hoping, I'm definitely going to be suggesting that to every single, voter I speak to, like, hello, you're paying them more. Are you getting the transparency and accountability you expected? And then hopefully also it would put pressure to turn the legislature maybe into a full-time, or at least 10 months of the year or 9 months of the year, maybe more similar to a teacher's schedule, so that we're getting more work done unless things are just killed because there isn't enough time. So I don't know, that's the other flip side to this. How do we work what's happening now and turn it into a win or gain? And what's happened, it is disappointing that leadership wouldn't hear the Republicans' bill that would have made this a debate on the floor and then taken a vote where people can actually vote. So just to be clear, my constituents in my district, I asked the question to them on the survey, do you support raising the salaries of judges and legislators? And overwhelmingly, they said no. And so if it came to a vote, I would have voted against it, despite my feeling of financial privilege. I would have said my constituents want me to vote against this.
Wow, a lot of ideas there. I appreciate you fighting for, the common good, and all of us public workers calling out that exemption policy and the privatization of public services. I think that's super important to do. And yeah, I would love to see something like a tie in with the rest of the public sector salaries with, the legislators' salaries, so that there's some accountability, and we're all rising together and we're not forgetting the people on the bottom.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, that was a great question, great response. Thank you. What before we run out of time, in my experience, people I talk to, the community overwhelmingly wants to do something, but they don't know what to do. So what advice would you give the rank and file people who don't know that much about the legislature, maybe, but they want to participate, they want to help make things better? Do they send that email? Do they make the call? Does that make a difference? Speak to any advice you would want to give people at home, so to speak.
Yes, well, so I can speak from my personal, the way I manage my office and my staff. we keep track of every single email and phone call that comes in. And we, we have a follow-up system, but we also, anytime somebody's expressing, if they're a constituent and they're expressing a position on an issue, we record it. And we also report it. We report it to other in our newsletter, excuse me, because we want to make sure that people know the kind of input I'm getting and what I'm responding to. So, hey, if you feel differently, please call in and balance the scales on this issue. So yeah, and demand, I will meet with every constituent that wants to meet with me. They're my boss, and we should be educating the public constantly to say, hey, your taxes go to pay my salary. You deserve to be represented. You deserve to know that I'm being held accountable to somebody. And so, yes, keep asking them to email and to follow up and to call, and to, when they have a town hall, to show up and say, hey, I called you on all these issues and you never got back to me. And why are you not reporting how people are voting? Why are you voting this way? What do you have to show? What kind of proof do you have that your constituents want you to vote that way on this issue? Really hold them accountable in public. I think that's really important. And then if they just brush you off, then you spread that around and you say, hey, yeah, my representative just totally brushed me off. And trust me, a lot, the previous representative who held this position, a lot of the constituents felt brushed off. And so they told me this and they voted accordingly.
So be involved. Your emails, your phone calls, showing up makes a difference.
Yeah, all of it. Do all of the above. Yeah. And especially when you're on taking a position on an issue, make sure your representative, your senator, they know that you're a constituent and you feel a certain way and why. And you want that, you not just want to you want them to know, but you want to know how they voted on the particular issue and why they voted that way.
I just want to throw out there, I got an email yesterday from someone who's on my email list, and we email back and forth. And they said they reached out to you on an issue that's important to them. And you responded and offered to meet with them. And they said that was the first time any legislator has ever offered to meet with them after getting a call. So that's totally unprompted. She didn't know you and I were friends or anything. So that's good. Right on.
Good.
Do you have any words of advice or encouragement for someone watching here today that might be thinking of throwing their name in the hat and running for office?
Yeah, it's do it. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to meet a lot of people, and they're going to tell you. One of the interesting things was when, just by speaking to my neighbors, they basically laid out my entire campaign strategy. They would be like, hey, you know what? You should focus on Queen Street and how horrible it is. Or, you know what? Like, you need to focus on pedestrian safety around crosswalks and you should focus on dog parks. You should focus on, so people actually give you the answers, and then, because they're feeling a certain way about things, but it's not just them. They represent a lot of other people. And and then you also find out who you are, and what matters to you, and what struggle that your neighbor's going through that really affects you. Anytime you run for office, it should feel genuine and authentic. It should come from a place, because it's very challenging. It's very exhausting. It's expensive. Finances and social capital, asking your friends and family to donate, volunteer, all of that, right? It's so personal to be a candidate that you really should make sure it's rooted for you in a very real place, in a wrong that you experienced, in an opportunity that you had because government got involved, and you want to make sure that we do more of that, or something like that. It should be very personal. You should feel connected to it, and yeah, and that should be the core of how where the power, your power source comes from, that authentic and reaction.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This was such a pleasure to hear your stories. I haven't really connected with you since you started your new job, basically. So a lot of these stories are
sorry.
Time. No, it's great.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for all you do for the community. I know it's a sacrifice, like you said. It's social capital. It's your time away from your family. But it was good. It was a good conversation. I know we had some issues in the beginning, some technical issues, but we powered through it, and we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity to connect with you and everyone watching this podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time, and thank you for staying engaged and informed. Appreciate it.
Hui ho.
Thank you. Hui ho.
She's great.
Yeah, she is. She's awesome. She's, like I said, a force of nature. And I know early on, someone was encouraging me to tell her to do something. And I said, Kim Coco is, no one tells her what to do. She's got her own core values. She listens, but she doesn't she listens to her now, and she works on it. She's not afraid of anything. She's willing to raise her hand and ask those tough questions. And our community should be very thankful that we have her serving. We need to get more people to be there with her, who will raise their hands and back her up and be a tag team. So it's good. Thank you, Aria Juliet. And we'll be on 2 weeks from now. And either we'll have a special guest, or you and I will just tag team back and forth and bring in the community and try to do our best to solve the problems of our community, or at least talk about them, at least explore them.
I've gotten a couple suggestions for guests, but I'd love to hear from the viewers that are watching now. If there's anyone in particular that you want us to invite on, we'll do our best to try and just secure them for next episode or future episodes. So let us know in the comments. We're at youtube.com/policy and politics high.
Yeah, and we're learning as we go, with the technology. We're streaming on some Facebook pages today, which is a first. And thank you, Mishka, for all your help, and for all the people that managed to show up and watch us tonight, and who will watch this recording in the future. GaryHooser.com is how you find me. If you want to be on my email list, which I reach out to weekly, go to GaryHooser.com and hit the subscribe button. Subscribe to my newsletter. I hate to call it a newsletter. My action letter, my missives. Claudette and I, my wife and I, had our 45th anniversary this week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I wrote, every year I write about how I met her in Waikiki and I was driving a pedicab. And every year I expand on that story. And so this year I wrote about the years before I met Claudette and the years after we got to Kauai, as well as a pedicab romantic story. And I sent that out. I try to alternate. I think we should, on the podcast also, we talk politics and policy. We talk about the serious problems we face and hopefully solutions. But we'll also talk about real life. We're people. We're got families and friends and challenges and bills to pay and careers to make. So yeah, people need to know we're human. I think talking about being a candidate, authenticity, be yourself. And I think that's what people want to hear. And so that's worked for me. That's for sure.
Totally.
Okay. That's all we got?
That's all we got.
Okay. Hui ho.
Hui ho.